Welcome to High Ground. My name is Tanner, and today we're going to be doing a recap for NAL's third stage of the 2022 season. I'll also talk about Europe just really briefly, and before I get into any of that, somebody commented on the previous video that Herds is the IGL for W7M. I feel like I've maybe heard that before. Let me know if that is the case. I thought, and I did say in the previous video, that it was GDN, their hard sport, and IGL, so that might have been incorrect. Do let me know if you do know that, if that's the case. Julio, I thought maybe it was going to come in as the IGL, but I thought it a little bit strange because I think it was like Psycho was their IGL for a long time, and then maybe it's now Kamikaze, so I'm not sure if Julio ever was their IGL. He very often did the interviews. I don't know if he just has the best English of the group or whatever the case, but so yeah, for Julio coming in to replace GDN on W7M, do let me know if you are aware of who is actually the IGL in that case. So yeah, let's talk about Europe. They've only had one play day, whereas NAL has had two, and then I guess LATAM has had none, and APAC, whatever the case is for them. M&M takes down TT9. TT9 replacing Pones, who were, Empire, but so now the actual Empire team out of Siege, and we'll talk about some Empire guys in a second. Yeah, they went to Chalet, and it seemed a little bit questionable. M&M really liked Chalet. It ended up being close, but M&M does get the full 3 points. Wolves take down Outsiders. Not terribly surprising. Maybe some people thought that Outsiders would have put up a little bit more of a fight, seeing as though they just got Dan and Always, but I mean, give them some time to readapt to the league. They've been out for a while. Former Empire players, Joystick coming in as coach, and a lot of people are saying that Joystick and Shepard will probably join the playing roster after the stage, maybe even Joystick during the stage, depending on how things go. But Wolves off to a hot start. They were the top team in Europe last stage. Heroic take down G2. Very surprising. G2 like always beats Heroic, but this not the case this time. Heroic a couple of player changes, which seemed to bring their dominance into question. I guess they weren't even dominant last stage, didn't go to the major, but in stage one they were very dominant, and they've made several roster changes since then. But G2 also making a roster change, bringing in Blur for Prano, and G2 also got off to a terrible start last stage and made the comeback, so maybe they'll have to do it this stage again. And then we have Na'Vi taking down Rogue. Pretty big shock. The new pickups for Na'Vi looking very good, and Rogue seemingly the best team in the world, so they just won the last major. That's still maybe up for debate, but okay, the reigning major champions get taken down in the first game. This very often happens to team. They win an event, whether that be a major or SI, and then they sort of slump, and part of that is probably fatigue and burnout, and part of that's also them having the biggest target on their back of anybody. So do keep that in mind. They still got a point on the board. Every reason to believe that they'll still make top 4 this stage. And then BDS taking down Secret, pretty much expected. Secret probably looking like the worst team in the league at the moment, maybe TT9, but certainly a bottom tier team, and they have some new pickups, and maybe they'll bounce back. BDS certainly a fearsome opponent, bringing in Leakafak, however you say his name, for this stage, and Border is probably a great map for any fragger to debut, and he did quite well, MVP of this match. So let's go on to NA. That was Europe. Okay, so first match was Oxygen versus Parabellum, and a little bit of a surprise to start out the season. I and others probably thought that Oxygen was going to take this game. I certainly thought it. I did predict it, but I did say I wasn't going to be terribly surprised if Parabellum took it, and then going to Border I think was a mistake. Definitely an ego chow by Oxygen, and they do lose it. I mean, they have some gunners. They have some real gunners. I mean, Dream, as far as supports go, probably one of the more gunner type supports, and then newer Sweater, Vertical. How can you argue with this frag power? Foxay obviously no slouch in his own right, but look at this Blaz and Doc and Asian, just crazy gunners, and then even Kool-Aid, also a very frag capable support, and then Eska, not a very good stage last stage, but he was the top rated player I think for Parabellum in stage number 1. Okay, so they do lose out this game, and the roles look a little bit weird for Oxygen. It seems like Sweater is just straight up playing Laxing's roles, but we'll have to see them on more maps and as the stage goes on, because if you were going to bring in somebody to play Laxing's roles, I mean, why even do that? Why not just keep Laxing? He was like the guy who played those roles, one of the only people that did it at such a high level. And Sweater, a very good player. There was also talk that Laxing was sort of not giving his all these days. Now he's the coach of Elevate, so we'll see if this ends up being a mistake, but a lot of time for Oxygen to bounce back. Okay, looking at the stats, Dream on top, and then Newers and Vertical, the two main fraggers, really struggling here. Blaz popping off 3-0 on entry, 13-6 on KD, going crazy. Asian and Doc also a good first game. They are two of the debut players for the stage, and then Kool-Aid and Eska not doing as well, but sure, 7-4 is still a solid scoreline to win by. Let's go on to game number 2. Astralis versus Dark Zero on Theme Park. Generally a very, very good map for Astralis, and Dark Zero take him to it, and they beat him. It's 8-6, so it's still a close game, But yeah, a little bit weird for Astralis to take a loss on perhaps their best map on the very first day. So let's take a look at what happened here. You'll notice Hyper really struggling, and he does so in the second game. One of the worst players in the league throughout the first 2 days, and he can definitely bounce back, but it's really weird seeing him play like this. He used to be Mr. Consistency, like constantly top 10, top 5, even like top rated player in the league just a couple years ago. And I mean, a couple of years is a long time, especially in Siege. And Pamba and Eclipse not doing terribly, but not doing that well. Canadian and NJR really popping off, and this is what got him over the line. 17-8, 15-8, going crazy. And over on Astralis, yeah, DP kind of struggling, and nobody did like terribly. I mean, -4, it's not great, but one of the support type players over here, it is what it is. 13-10, 10-11, just not enough to get them across the line, but it was enough. Their combined efforts to get them a single point. So better than nothing. Okay, let's go on to game number 3. We have TSM versus Mirage, and I think a lot of people expected Mirage to come out of the gates hot. Maybe not against TSM, but maybe against TSM, seeing as though they've been pretty bad this season, and also 2 pickups that some people are kind of questioning, especially Gasher, but Snake and Gasher both have been very, very good in the first 2 days. Mirage, it looks like maybe they would just continue to be the laughing stock of the NAL, but we'll talk more about that in their second game, actually. Going to Theme Park, this is the map that Mirage beat TSM on in, I think it was stage number 1, so it seems like a map that Mirage likes. Of course, they've made some changes, and a map that TSM has been pretty willing to go to in the past. They took a few losses on at stage 1. I don't think they really played it much stage 2, but here it is back, and they look really good. I mean, let's see the stats. Everybody doing very well on TSM, all things considered. I guess, just slightly below 1.0 for Bolo, but Gasher, Snake, and Merc all popping off, and Achieve doing fine enough. So nobody really doing bad on TSM, whereas on Mirage, yeah, Dexter and Kento not doing very well. This is Dexter's debut game in T1, unless you count Gamers 8. Maybe you'd call that a T1 tournament. He didn't do especially well in that tournament. He had like 1 game he did pretty well, 1 match. But okay, so not off to a great start. Mohesi, the hard support IGL, 7-7 is respectable, and then Benji on top. Love to see it. +1 Benji money, and he actually does quite well in the next game. So we'll talk about Mirage, I guess, more in the next game. I think that's a good place to talk about them. Let's go on to what is this, game number 4, and definitely, yeah, the sort of lock-in game for day number 1. It would have been really, really surprising if Beast Coast beat XSET, or even if this was a close game. It went to like 2-2. It looked like Beast Coast might put up a decent fight, and then XSET called a timeout. They won the next 5 rounds, won 7-2. So played on Chalet, usually a pretty good map for XSET, and it turns out to be pretty questionable for Beast Coast. They play it both matches that they play, and they only win 3 rounds on it. So several teams played the same map twice: Astralis and Beast Coast and Parabellum, maybe one other team, but so at least 3 teams playing same map back to back. I feel like it's not that common that happens. Looking at the stats, yeah, everybody doing well, at least +3 or better for every player in XSET is kind of crazy. And Beast Coast winning only a single entry engagement, they just got crushed, just through and through. Nobody going positive on rating or KD or even entry. Yeah, just brutal, and especially brutal debut for Zeno, the only new player in this lobby. Ferda not being able to play due to visa issues, so Zeno with all the spotlight on him, and has a terrible performance. And I mean, it's tough, as a seemingly a weaker roster. We'll see if they can maybe get some wins, but especially not being able to play with your full 5 it's just really tough, really brutal. And yeah, they did get brutalized by the likes of XSET, who are still potentially the best team in NAL. We'll see what happens going forward, and because of what happens in their next game. So let's go on to the next game. This is the final game of the first day. Sonics versus Space Station, probably perhaps the most exciting game. Didn't go to overtime like the Dark Zero Astralis game, but still 7-5 is as close as you can get to overtime without going there. We see Skyscraper, and this is a map I don't think we've seen Sonics play on it since the first game of the first stage. They played against Astralis. They got crushed 7-1, and so they've been keeping it in their pocket since then, and they pull it out here to get the full 3 points. It is a close affair, but still they do take it down without dropping any points. And looking at the score, the ratings, it doesn't look like this was a close game, with Grixer, Rex, and Kansan all popping off. Geo and Gunner not doing as well, the 2 new additions to the roster, but Geo, it sort of makes sense. They're hard support player. It is what it is. Yeah, I feel like I've already said, and probably will say it is what it is a bunch throughout this video. So as a matter of that, also it is what it is. But okay, hot and cold, head above water in terms of KD and rating, but the only player over here, Bosco and Fultz, especially having rough games. Bosco, you can probably have bad games. He is the hard support IGL, playing Thermite Smoke, having a bad game. It's expected most of the time, but you certainly can't have Bosco going 3-10 and Fultz going 6-11. And I mean, I guess they were close to at least going to overtime. They just needed one more round. But yeah, definitely would like to see better from Fultz in the future, and even Rampy and Yeti. I mean, obviously they are very capable players that you can expect more from than what they put up in this game. So Sonics off to a good start. Space Station off to a pretty good start. I mean, almost taking Sonics to overtime. Sonics obviously a very good team. And let's continue on to the second day. We have Beastgo versus TSM to start off the day. The biggest beatdown thus far. Not a 7-0. We haven't seen a 7-0 yet, but indeed a 7-1. That means Beastgo have only won 3 rounds, all on Chalet, so maybe we won't really see Chalet from them going forward. I don't know if they just thought they were good on Chalet, if maybe it is one of their middling maps or whatever, and they're just trying to hide their good maps for when they have Ferda. I don't know if Ferda's even going to get here during this stage. We'll see what actually happens, but TSM not seeming to really... I won't say skip a beat because they weren't very good last stage. They came out of the gates really hot. They were like the top team for the first week or two, and then they got 8th place and didn't go to the major. So if they can repeat the early performance for last stage and then improve on it, they probably will go to the major. Do keep in mind they played against Beastgo and Mirage. They probably had the earliest or the easiest week 1, so do take that into consideration. And then looking at the stats, yeah, Surf doing okay, nobody else doing okay. Anthony's like 4-16. He's going to need to do a lot better to help his team out, but also to prove that he's not the worst player in the league at the moment. It is a very competitive league. I mean, it's hard to be one of the best players, and it's pretty easy to be one of the worst players. Even like really, really good players in the grand scheme of things are not going to be top players in the NAL. That's just how good the average player is. Bolo, maybe he's back, maybe it's Maybelline, maybe it's a fluke, and maybe he's just playing Beastgo. I don't know, but 12-3 obviously is monumental. Snake and Gash are doing well once again, Merc as well, and then Achieved, kind of quiet to start things out, but his team has only dropped, like 4 rounds, so I mean, who really cares? Okay, that's that game. Not too much to really break down there. Xset versus Parabellum, another surprise victory for Parabellum, taking down Oxygen and taking down Xset, neither in overtime. This puts them at the top of the board with Sonics and TSM. We'll see the standings at the end of the video. Yeah, Xset, maybe they aren't the best team in the league, maybe it's Parabellum, or maybe teams should stop taking Parabellum to border. Perhaps another ego chow. I mean, Xset, I look at the firepower on this roster as well. I think it sort of makes sense to take a team to border, but when you didn't make any roster changes and they did make some roster changes and they're sort of a new team probably figuring things out, border just seems like the last map you want to take them to. It allows them to just play off each other and not have to really rely on strategy so much as individual skill. So probably we won't see anyone taking Parabellum to border for the rest of the stage, and if they do, I mean, they might just get pummeled. So looking at the stats here, Diaz and Yaga doing okay, generally the 2 most consistent players on the roster, and then Kino and especially Gomez and Spirits not doing too hot. Definitely would have liked to have seen a few more frags come out from them, and then if they had, maybe that would have gone to overtime. And Kool-Aid popping off. Kool-Aid continues to be quite good. He was good last stage, and he was phenomenal in this game, getting obviously the MVP. Just look at the stats here. He is playing, I mean, Ace and Malusi obviously very frag capable operators, but still he is more in the support role than some of their other players. Doc on Smoke is a little bit weird, but I think he was playing FMG9 Smoke most of the time. But yeah, a great first week for Doc, and then pretty good for Asian. 7-7 is not amazing, but between the 2 games he did quite well. And even Blaz and Eska. Blaz a little bit of a cool off, and then Eska a little bit of an improvement. Nobody doing bad on Parabellum. And that's the reason that they were able to win, whereas, again, Gomez and Spirits doing quite poorly. And, okay, let's move on to the next game. We have Astralis versus Mirage. And so here it is, Mirage finally getting a victory. This is their 20th game in NAL. Every team has played, I guess, 20 games now. Because 9 in the first stage, 9 in the second stage, 2 in the third stage thus far. In 20 games, they've never gone to overtime. They are I think they're 5-15. 5 wins, 15 losses, but none of them in overtime, funnily enough. We'll see if they actually make it there at any point. If they just win every game in regulation, they're perfectly happy. They play on Theme Park for the second or where did Mirage play the first game? Yeah, they played Theme Park twice. Astralis played Theme Park twice, and Mirage lost and then won, and Astralis actually lost both of them. So a bit curious there, but yeah, this is the performance I think a lot of people expected from Mirage, or at least hope from Mirage. And so let's see how the players played. Iconic doing pretty well. Shuttle and Forest not as well. Jane I know even worse. And then DP Fire 1-10 is brutal. He is one of their more support-oriented players, but still 1-10, that's tough. And then over on Mirage, Benji Money really popping off. The top-rated player for them in both of their games, and obviously massive impact. 11-4 is just huge. No entry engagements, but that's not really his job. Dexter 3-0 on the entry, very good. 13-7. So massive improvement from his performance in the first game, and then Melta doing pretty well. Mohesi and Kento not as good. Kento, I think, the lowest rated player in both games, so not a great start from him, but we'll see how he plays on non-theme park maps. Maybe it's just not his map. So yeah, a lot of hope for Mirage there, and maybe it's just Astralis being bad. So This also, I think, discredits Dark Zero a little bit because they narrowly beat Astralis, but Astralis loses to Mirage, and then I guess we'll go on to the next game because isn't this the Dark Zero? Yeah, so and Dark Zero also get crushed here. So, you know, again, if Astralis is not very good this stage and they barely beat them, Astralis lost to Mirage, they get crushed by Sonics. You know, it's a lot of things to consider, and it's only 2 days in, so no reason to think that Dark Zero or Astralis or anybody can't bounce back. But maybe they won't be the powerhouses that some people expected that they could be. Play on Clubhouse here, not a map that we see a ton of these days, but always one that is fun to see, mostly for that reason. It's a very classic map, and then also it's a sort of an uncommon map. We do see 5 different maps in the second day, and I think only like 6 maps between the first 2 days, Skyscraper, and then these 5 maps. What did we see? I guess we have one more map to play after this, but we saw Clubhouse, Chalet, Theme Park, Border, and Cafe is the last map we'll play. So 5 different maps in one day is very cool. Always love to see that. The stats, Kanzan, Gunner, and Grixer. So it was Kanzan, Grixer, and Rexen top 3 in the last game, and now Kanzan and Grixer stay up here. Joined by Gunner, 11 and 6. Massive improvement from the first game. Cost not very good, but massive impact in a few rounds. And then Geo, 4 and 5, 0.96 rating, fine enough. Again, that is their support player, Thermite, Smoke, do keep in mind. Over on Dark Zero, Canadian, was he the highest rated player in the first game, or was it NJR? They were both pretty high up. But Canadian, best performing player for Dark Zero thus far. Probably doesn't bode that well. It generally shouldn't be that way considering the roles he's playing. IGL and sort of flex. It should be Pamba, NJR, Hyper, one of them at the top. Probably Pamba or Hyper, but brutal performance from Hyper thus far. One of the lowest rated players in the league. Going to have to bounce back. Did I already say this? Maybe I did. Eclipse not doing too well either, but on the rolls it makes more sense for him to do bad than Hyper. And NJR started off like 0-6 or something. I don't think he got a kill in the first half. Maybe he was 0-5, and then he really bounced back, but not enough to really get his team many rounds on the board. So we will go to the final game. Oxygen versus Space Station, the first game to go all 15 rounds, and this was almost another comeback victory for Oxygen. They had several last stage. They had one versus Beast Coast, one versus Parabellum, both on Theme Park. I think they've even had some comeback victories on Cafe, at least one. It must have been stage 1 of this year versus Parabellum. They came back from like 3-6 deficit to win the match. They won, I think, 8-6, and they almost did it here. They were down 3-6 against Space Station, and then they brought it to 7-6, and then Space Station won the last 2 rounds. So my heart was going to be broken had Space Station lost. Would have loved to have seen them get the full 3 points. They had the opportunity at 6-3, 6-4, 6-5, but Oxygen was resilient, but not enough so to win the game. Yeah, and so a Cafe also generally a pretty rare map, not as fun of a one to watch as Clubhouse. I'd say there is a reason it's kind of rare. I don't think it's an especially fun map given the maps in this pool. And yeah, Newers and Vertical doing quite well. I think they were the lowest 2 rated players from the first game, so it's nice to see them flip to the top. Sweater in the middle, Fox A Dream. Looking at the stats, it does not look like Oxygen lost this game. It looks like they won like 7-4 or something, obviously ignoring the kill counts, but just looking at the ratings. And then Yeti on top, love to see that, the new addition to the team. And then Fultz, a bounce back from the first game, Houghton in the middle. And then it's Bosco and Rampy really struggling. At least a few more kills from Bosco coming out, and Rampy not doing too well either. Generally, you need to have at least 4 players doing pretty well to win a game, but I mean, they got away with only having 3 players doing decently with, again, Bosco and Rampy not doing very well. Yeah, very weird scoreboard to look at, and so I guess Oxygen must have won a few rounds pretty dominantly, and Space Station not nearly as many for this to happen. Look at the entry here, though. They won only 3 entry engagements of 15 rounds, Space Station. 0-6 from Rampy. That's so brutal. I think a lot of these were traded pretty quickly, so, I mean, you know, it's not like it was a 5v4 for a significant amount of time, but still, 12 of 15 to Oxygen, and they didn't win. That is kind of tough. So that's going to do it for all of the games. So let's take a look at the standings. We'll call it a day. Yeah, TSM, Sonics, and Parabellum tied at the top in terms of points, but it is ordered by round differential for the time being. Xset and Mirage on 3 points. I was surprised to see Mirage tied at Xset. I think Mirage 9th place in power rankings, Xset 1st place in the power rankings. Space Station and Dark Zero on 2, Oxygen and Astralis on 1, and then Beast Coast dead last, and not by a pretty massive margin. Obviously just a 1 point difference, but every other team's won at least 10 rounds. They've only won 3 over 2 games. Yeah, they're going to need to bounce back hard if they want to even get out of last place. Okay, Astralis, Oxygen, definitely the capacity to bounce back. The 2 most consistent teams, I guess, over the course of the first 2 stages, Astralis back-to-back firsts, Oxygen second into third, and they probably should have got 1st place last stage. They definitely let it slip. And then even Dark Zero, surprised to see them down here. They got 5th place, missed out on the major last stage, but they made the major first stage. They won that major, and they're usually not a top team within the region. They've always been between 3rd and 6th place within 2021 and 2022 seasons. but it's strange to see them towards the bottom. But as is the case for any team, TSM, they could fall off. They did fall off last stage. They were like the top team after the first 2 weeks, and then they got 8th place, didn't go to major. Sonics, they had to claw their way back. They didn't do very well early on, and then they ended up in 2nd place. Parabellum, hopefully they don't fall off. They had 6 points over the first 4 games, I think, last stage, and now they've done it in just 2 games, so very good. And then Xset, I expect a bounce back from them. The loss to Parabellum, I mean, maybe it'll be their only loss, we'll have to see. Maybe Parabellum is just the real deal. But okay, I think I've talked about all these teams sufficiently. Don't think I really have much else to say. So if you have your own comments, your own questions, concerns, any of that stuff, corrections, suggestions, feel free to leave them below. A like and a subscription would also be appreciated. And with all of that being said, catch you guys in the next video.